Dungeons and Dragons are what we're talking about today. Dungeons and Dragons are what we played yesterday. Dungeons and Dragons are what we love each and every day. Each and every day we play D&D on Disorganized Play. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Disorganized Play. Bottle-a-dum. Disorganized Play. Bottle-a-dum.
Okay.
We're here today to do Disorganized. I don't know. It was a serenade, you guys. You said John Philip Sousa.
The great creator.
You said
John Philip Sousa.
You said 76 trombones, and that's basically what we got. Hey everyone, I'm Tom Lommel. I'm your co-host. I'm the lead trombonist.
Oh, don't say that to someone who was a lead trombonist.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm your first chair tenor saxophonist.
Okay, there we go.
This is my rusty trombonist. I couldn't help but make that joke. This is lead trombonist Tom Zook, our fearless leader and producer here on the Same Throw Show. Hey everyone! Every Tuesday, I sit down and with Dom and we talk about what's going to happen in this week's game. Every Wednesday, we actually sit down with Dom and a bunch of very fun, cool people. And don't strangle me. And then every Thursday, we come back, reassemble ourselves, and hold forth court on how it went.
Yeah.
It's the after show.
Right.
But it's not, well, I mean, it is technically after the show, but it's,
Sure.
But it's literally
It's kind of like a talk back.
18 hours after the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there you go.
Talk keep.
Iron Talk.
The Iron Talk Chronicles.
Chat keep. Keep after keep.
Expedition to the barrier chat.
Barrier chat. I don't know. It feels like Friday. It's not Friday. It's Thursday. But anyway, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad that you're all here. We're going to talk about a couple different things, several different things. As a matter of fact, we're going to talk about. Where am I? Over here? No, over here. The puzzle that wasn't. What's that? Veggie Diplomacy. That was actually my favorite, maybe my favorite title of a chat unlockable last night. Veggie Diplomacy. And then we're going to do the Plot Radar, which we haven't seen yet so far in this stream, and actually, or in this cycle of storyline. And we didn't see, I think, kind of to the detriment of the story, I didn't deploy it during our foray into Waterdeep, right? So I think we got into kind of a wandering morass there, partly because I wasn't tracking the various plot elements and whatnot. So we're going to try and keep up with it. That's the goal. We'll see if that actually plays out, because it's easy to neglect, but you pay the price, right? And then I'll do some Q&A. We'll talk about, your game or whatever, preferably RPG stuff that you would like to discuss. If there's other stuff you want to discuss, that's fine too, but that's generally my area of expertise and experience. Mm-hmm. So, there we go. I did just... There were a lot of crazy Ivans in that game. All right, so, but before we get to kind of the specifics of how the session went last night, Dom, was there anything that was set up on Tuesday that either did pay off or did not pay off last night that you were either pleasantly surprised by or a little surprised that it didn't show up or whatever?
The whole pit with the monster in it, I didn't think that we had talked about that so much. Did we?
We didn't talk about the monster pit at all.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so that kind of came out of
Bastion Field says, what page is the wandering morass on? Is that the monster that we're talking about? That was a trapper. It's in Volo's Guide to Monsters. So I don't remember what page it's on, but it's a trapper basically. Lurker above and trapper are the same monster. It's just that one goes like this and one goes like this. So
I'll look it up. But
look it up. I mean that's in the module canonically, right? So
yeah.
That's part of the whole thing.
Trapper.
Yeah, Trapper, page 194.
194 for this guy.
Knock yourself out. I don't know what you're gonna look at. What CR it is?
Oh, what CR?
I don't remember what CR. I thought about toughening it up a little bit, but I thought it was all right. CR3, so it was a little bit easier encounter. I considered boosting its hit points, so it might have a little bit stronger. The Wandering Morass. I found myself in Tracking the Plot in Waterdeep. Yeah, that adventure went all over the place. True. I thought about making that monster a little tougher because it was a little bit of a pushover, but it was fine. I think, and then in the end, time-wise, I thought it worked out fine because we had a very long role-playing encounter with the Vegapygmies.
The other thing was the owls. You didn't introduce an owl.
Yes, they found an owl right away. That was that thing, and we talked about it. I showed them the picture.
I was busy. Behind the
You were busy. Havana looked at it and was like, oh, have I seen this before? Is that the remote control that they used to like shock my parents and stuff? And I was like, no, but then then she like zoomed in on the memory and she saw one of those things floating over the Vegapygmy's shoulder.
Okay, so they found a broken owl.
They found one where the battery's dead.
Okay. Because the one thing was we had a reward tier that was the owl would do things, but they never found a battery for it, I guess.
They would have if the chat would have unlocked that. If you guys are worried about, I don't know how this is going to come into play, trust me a little bit, like I will make the owl like functional. You put the battery in, suddenly it lights up and begins translating shit. Like all they have to do is find a battery, but I'm not going to just throw batteries at the thing willy-nilly.
So there you go, guys.
So if you're worried that, I don't understand how we're going to like fit this in or whatever, that's my problem. That's not your problem. To be honest, the earlier that stuff gets unlocked in the session, the earlier it is for me to incorporate it, right? So, I mean, the donations are what the donations are, and some of the stuff that I would like to see happen obviously gets front-loaded. It was, and I will discuss this in more detail, but it was nice to have a role-playing scene with the Vegapygmies as opposed to having them, number one, like just be combat monsters, and number two, being completely incomprehensible.
Right.
So I certainly have a predisposition to certain things happening, but like those are bonus things that can happen.
Sure.
And like last time with the owls, where they found an owl. If I don't work it into that session, I will work it into the beginning of the next session. So I don't generally throw stuff in there unless it's like a real big, like at the $250 level. That's when I put stuff in there that's like, well, this would be a big loop-to-loop, and I don't know how, this may not happen for another session or may not happen for down the road.
Yeah.
That's the weird stuff, is generally at the $250 level. But everything else, like, I had ideas for how to work all that stuff in. And the most obvious thing being like, the owl could translate.
Right.
But all they had to do was find a battery. It was not an insurmountable problem at all. Oh boy, they are technically owl bearers. Bastion feels. There's a way to block him, right?
Yeah. Banned.
Oh, resident punster, at it again. So, I thought that honestly, like, I looked at that encounter in the adventure, and I was a little bit kind of like, I don't know, whatever. But I liked the fact that the, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that we were.
I don't know.
Okay, there. Now I'm modeling product as well.
5 minutes of silence. Okay.
I was pleasantly surprised by that, like how weird that got right away, right? I thought for sure, I don't know, it seemed like a fairly tame kind of actually sort of standard encounter of like, oh, okay, and then a trapper starts to envelop them. Like, I didn't think it was that great. But when it played out in actual practice, like number one, I didn't realize that Havana was going to freak out about it as much as she was.
Yeah.
And then number two, it was just a fun combat encounter where they were having fun. Like, am I going to be in the pit and not in the pit? And Grayson jumps in, and Thawne teleports out, and and she's got the rope, and she's yelling, and It was I think kind of like for our game like a classic scene of like cluster chaos. So I was actually pleasantly surprised by that encounter myself. Yeah.
He jumped out. He could jump.
Yeah, he can just jump. He can just jump 9 feet. He can just do that. So yeah. Overall, I thought it was a good session, and I had a good time, and I agree with you that those were some standout moments. So there we go. All right, so let's talk in a little bit more detail. Hey, James V, thanks for checking in. We'll catch you on the VOD. So let's talk about a couple things. Number one, the puzzle that wasn't. So what this turned out to be was them, what this is referring to is them cracking the door to get into the actual ship, right? And it just wasn't, the premise of the puzzle wasn't set up very well. Grayson was intent on like, let's just carve our way through this door. And I thought that turned into it managed to turn into a nice moment because he wasn't doing so much damage that I was like, oh, you're just like destroying this thing with giant holes. It was only like 10 points of damage, and that was what prompted the idea of like, oh, maybe there's some sort of shell over this thing that he's breaking through. So I liked that. And they really fairly quickly got the idea that there's a door here. They didn't so much figure out like what the characters on the map had to do with anything until they revealed the keypad. And then when they revealed the keypad, it was really just too obvious, right? It just seemed too straight. Like, honestly, this is one of those times where your job as the DM is to challenge the players, and there wasn't enough challenge there for them to go, well, this is the obvious solution. I don't know what else it would be, but that doesn't seem like a big enough challenge, right? So we've talked about that a lot, is like, how do I challenge them enough so that it seems satisfying, to the point where they were themselves like taking a solution kind of out of contention because they're like, that seems too easy,
right? But
I don't know what else we could try.
Right.
And they were actually looking for a harder, more clever solution than what they had.
Right.
And I think that's an interesting moment of play to note, right? Is that I made it too easy on the players, and they wanted something harder. If you go back and watch, that's what you'll see in action. This seems too obvious. And I thought it would be more of a puzzle. I also sort of misinterpreted, like I meant like, well, let me back up. This, coming out of this segue from the Cave of the Iron Worm to getting into the actual spaceship, I had a whole nother series of encounters planned, but I forgot my iPad at home, and I wasn't going to just run them off the top of my head. And also I wanted to get them into the actual ship, and I was afraid if I ran them through what was basically going to end up being 3 additional rooms, then we might start falling behind in the plot, right? So yeah, they were trying to avoid metagaming the scenario, so that's good too. Yeah, so Eric's going to break stuff with that sword, and I need to be a little more generous with letting him do it, but I wanted them to use the map for something. So I sort of led him to that solution. The other thing too is that it was obviously an airlock, and I didn't want them to destroy the airlock because the airlock's not going to work. Like, I don't know, it'd be an interesting challenge, right? Like if they destroy the outer door of the airlock and then they realize what it is. The problem with that is it's a fantasy world, so they don't know what an airlock is.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
As players they do, but then how do they play that knowledge?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of metagaming going on, not only with the players, but also with me, where like, okay, logically I don't want you to destroy this airlock because that would be bad for you. Although in a fantasy world, you have no reason not to destroy the airlock.
Right.
Right? So it's a little, we're all dancing the dance a little bit. I'm not sure I have entirely great ways. Well, I do have some tricks up my sleeve that I can use to help alleviate that, but certainly not before you've introduced the idea that you're in a spaceship or whatever. Yeah. So I had this, honestly, I had it set up so that there was going to be, the original scenario as I envisioned it was they go into the airlock, they find themselves in sort of this observation pod or whatever that's attached to the ship, like part of the antenna array or something like that. and they find kind of evidence that somebody had been sleeping there, and right? If that stuff gets unlocked. But then there's another panel on the wall that summons an elevator that comes up the antenna gantry, right? So that little elevator pod comes up, and they can use the codes that are in the map to program the elevator pod and take them into the ship, right? That was the original plan. So that's what it was supposed to do, and I tried to kind of shoehorn that into this scenario where they needed to open the 2 doors or whatever it was. It wasn't. It was fine. It was a fine. It was a nice intro to like, let's try and navigate the scenario where we all know what's going on, but we can't acknowledge what's going on. So that piece of it was okay. It probably went a little bit longer than it needed to, but we got to where we needed to go, right? And then we got into the ship. And like I said, the fight with the lurker was fun and interesting. I wish I had relied on my little random area descriptor chart a little bit more to paint the environment in a little more detail. Include some of those elements that I had on the chart that I didn't include in terms of like smell or maybe the occasional sound or things like that.
Yeah.
So I wish I would have taken advantage of that. But you will notice if you go back and watch, there was a moment where Megan was like, how much moisture is there around here? And I could actually roll on my frickin' table. You'll see me do it. I sit there, I roll, and I rolled 2d20, but I just count them as 10-siders. And I rolled a 7, and I go, oh, okay, well, it's like it's raining in here. It's like a rainforest. So that piece of prep, like that's a tool I have in my back pocket that's going to pay off, continuously as we continue to explore the ship. I also like the idea that the ship is describing the ship more as a maze than anything else. It seems like you're in a labyrinth.
Yeah.
Like it's relatable to the party in terms of their fantasy characters. They know what a maze is. It also paints the dungeon in a different light, where they were like, how do we get to those people? How do we find them? We're in this huge thing. So it gave them a sense of scale that I don't think you would get by just drawing on the map. Oh, okay, so then you go 80 feet this way, and then the corridor jogs 40 feet this way. Like, that doesn't feel like a very big ship. Whereas describing them through theater of the mind, like, okay, you go down this long passageway, and there's all these overgrown plants. You take a right, and it gets darker, right? Yeah. Put your hand on a wall and just keep walking, right? Yeah, that was a moment of illumination. We're all at different stages in our adventuring career, aren't we? Yeah. So overall, I thought the puzzle was a little flat, but it was a learning experience, and we got through it. So veggie diplomacy, right? Veggie diplomacy. I could have painted more detail in this scene, I think, in terms of like describing the chieftain, making sure that he used a name, maybe giving a little more description to the mud bath area where he was lounging and whatnot. So the thing was, I was really going like way off book with that, because those rooms aren't described in the module.
Yeah.
Other than this used to be a game room. And none of that stuff is in there with the mud bath or any of that stuff. Right. But that being said, there's some areas where we could have like brushed it up and polished it up. But that being said, I thought it was far, far more effective for this thing to be a role-playing encounter than in the book is written. It's a combat encounter of like, how do you take up this colony of Vegapygmies, right? And they attack you, and you don't know why, and they have some stuff that they don't understand, but you might find if you kill them. That was another thing that came up last night, was like, oh, they will get a item that they can understand without having to navigate the tech tree. It's like, the chieftain has a bunch of technological gewgaws like listed in his treasure assortment. He would have just given one of them to the party. We don't believe in this, but you may need this if you're going to fight those people.
Sure.
So,
Chief Mudbutt.
Chief Mudbutt, yeah. I thought there was an interesting dynamic going on there, where he said, your creation myth is the same as our creation myth, right? Now, there's a major disconnect happening between what the party was what Eric was asking about and what the chief was describing, right? Is that Eric was asking about the God's fire. And he said, okay, well, gods are all around us and the fire is down in hell. Okay, well, we have this creation myth. Okay, we also have this creation myth of a great cataclysm that happened. Eric is assuming that the God's fire is the cataclysm. That's not true, right? So the cataclysm is a different event. The God's fire is something else within the ship.
Yeah.
Either one of the systems or whatever it is, right? And so there was a big miscommunication, not intentionally happening, but I let it intentionally happen, where he thought they were talking about the God's fire over and over and over again, and the chief was talking about this cataclysm that keeps revisiting revisiting heaven.
Yeah.
I also thought it was very interesting in terms of the chief describing this place in cosmological terms, right? We're in heaven. There's 3 hells. There's earth. The God's fire is in the 3rd hell. Now, if we go and look at the adventure, you can tell that that's deck 1, deck 2, deck 3, deck 4, deck 5, right? That's fine, but I think it's an interesting concept to me that these Vegapygmies, I wanted to set up the idea that there's Vegapygmies who are essentially kind of like Amish Luddites, kind of just like literally tree people who are like, we just are one with the universe and our fate drifts as the wind drifts, right? And then I wanted there to be Vegapygmies who were like, well, we want to try and use technology. There's all these technological artifacts and remnants around, and we want to try and recapture like whatever magic that is that's powerful.
Yeah.
So that's who those Vegapygmies are. So it gave me an angle on what's the difference. What are these people like? Why are these people different? So so there's a lot of kind of almost like a theological overtone going to it. I did not anticipate that most of the party would not participate in the mind meld. I thought that was, I don't know why I didn't anticipate that. I also, it was weird because that whole scene got very railroady in terms of the players didn't feel like they had a choice about where to go, right? It was like, oh, okay, well, we've decided to befriend these people for better or for worse. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse from our perspective. Like, there's more of them. They're filling in behind us. Da 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 da. So, Shimmickson says the story seemed to imply that in order to gain access to this deck, they had to become Vegapygmies. I mean, is that true? I don't know. He did talk about that there's keys to heaven. I think there is. Yeah, there was certainly some like personal, like, I don't want to get stuck or barbed with anything. I get that. Like I should have anticipated that they weren't going to do that. It would have been better. Well, but even with the spreading the like spore things, they were like, nope, don't do that to me.
Yeah.
And it's it was an interesting line to walk just because, like, you kind of got to either commit or not. They were sort of half-assing it, right? Like they felt like they were getting led into something, and you can either embrace it, or you can basically like draw swords as soon as the guy with the blue shoulders comes out and is like, all right, now tell us what's really going on.
Yeah, it was interesting. The note of restraint that the party was showing amidst everything, like. Grayson was allowing them to do all this stuff to him, and then they hurt him, and everyone's just all like, are you going to keep letting that happen? And he's just like, yeah, it's fine. I'm just like, I don't know. If I put my hand in mud and then something stings me,
right.
I'm going to draw my hand out super fast and probably not put it back in there. Like, why would I do that? Like, I don't know. Until it starts talking to them, I guess. Misunderstanding the idea of melding, Grayson seemed to think it meant becoming a part of something kind of hive-mindish, when it was otherwise clearly just, hey dorks, do this, and you can understand what he's saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that was sort of the implication. I don't know. I think maybe I've just toyed with them too much of like, having things implanted in their brains and whatnot, that they just are very skittish about that whole situation, which is on me more than necessarily it's on them. I could have just introduced that thing as a lot more gradual. So I realized this morning in looking back on it, it could have just been a thing where like, he's like, join me in the mud bath, and you're sitting there and bubbling and it's nice and you start to relax and everything's fine. And then gradually you realize like, hey, feel a little woozy and kind of intoxicated and things are a little bit blurry. And maybe not give them a saving throw on it or whatever, because they voluntarily went into it, right?
Right.
That's more of a slow acting experience. And then it's one of those things where they find out, oh shit, we're in this thing, whether they want to be or not.
Yeah.
And that would have been a gentler, although far more railroady experience, which is surprising.
Yeah.
Right? That actually the better scenario for all of them would have been to just full on railroad them into, you're all drunk and in this mind meld, rather than giving them a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
It's an interesting point of like, where do you take agency away from them or whatever. So that was a little. Grayson is definitely the guinea pig. I think it's because he feels like he has to protect the party, and also I think he has like the most hit points.
Yeah, that's true.
Or pretty close to it, right? Like he's going to do that. So that's fine. I also think it was one of those situations where they had just entered the place and they had no idea what was going on, and this seemed like a way to get more information, so they had to sort of begrudgingly go along with it.
Right.
But they continually put themselves in these situations where one particular party member gets a piece of information and they don't all join in on the discussion, so it's all being filtered through one person, and they can only get, we saw it earlier with the door where Grayson was like, well, I don't have access to this map because Havana hadn't made a copy of it for everyone, right? And then we saw it in the Vegapygmy scenario where Grayson's the only one talking to them, and he has to filter the clues back out to the party through his character's perception of them or sharing what he wants to share about them. And I don't know how productive that is for them. It's something. It's just a situation that I've noticed, like, keeps recurring. That even though they kind of hate secrets, they do manage to like keep a lot of secrets from each other, like on stuff. Unnecessary secrets is what it kind of the tricky part, right? Like, there's no reason that Grayson couldn't have said to everybody, hey, you know what? I think this is going to be all right. Like, why don't you just take part? So anyway, I don't know. That's that. But I will say that overall, there were a lot of interesting elements in that encounter. And just to circle back around to the idea that you have to become a Vegapygmy to get on this deck, I do think there's an opportunity. This was more in hindsight this morning than something that I deliberately set up. Doesn't mean it can't still be true or not apply. But I do think there's a thing where maybe if you die down in below decks, right? You get recycled up into the waste management system and get reborn as a Vegapygmy in the heaven decks, right? Like, there's an interesting opportunity there for that to be like one of the implications of this cosmology. Or if nothing else, I think there could be a thing where when one of the Vegapygmies is about, in this particular tribe, is about to die, they come and they bury him in this mud bath thing, and he's reborn as a new Vegapygmy, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's how they reproduce. And so nobody actually, like, they do continually, like, recycle their consciousness or whatever.
Right.
Maybe it doesn't have all the same knowledge or whatever, but I think that's a fairly fascinating idea, right?
Yeah, although you're giving a lot of power to that mud pit that is theoretically belonging to the God's Fire, right? That issue of being reborn and rebirth and stuff.
Well, I think that can be something that can be throughout the ship, right? Right. So like, I don't think the mud pit is the God's Fire, right? But if we assume that there are technological facilities on the ship that create and alter life, whether that's genetic mutation or cloning or whatever it is, then I think it's safe to assume that there's probably more than one system for doing that, or it could be more common than we typically think of. You know, like when we think of it, like, okay, there's clone vats and they're in one place and they do one thing, right? But maybe there's one type of like genetic mutation thing or whatever, or maybe just the AI who's responsible for this piece of it has gone out and like scavenged together a bunch of stuff, and like this one is part of the hydroponic system, but we've altered it so that it can actually create life forms. You know, I've hacked it. I've had some of these robot minions hack it so that it can create Vegapygmies. It's not what it doesn't work the way that my other more advanced stuff works, but that stuff is offline. So you could have multiple different, either cloning, mutation, body altering, genetic sequencing, whatever you want to call it, like those different, you could have multiple different types of that technology deployed throughout the ship, and not necessarily working in concert, or some of it's offline and unavailable, you know? So if we go with the idea that they could create they have to decant or create a body or a vessel for Basharla, part of their quest might be, okay, we need to go to this lab, activate or repair the equipment, and get the proper amount of power or supplies or, you know, MacGuffins loaded into the hopper so that it can actually produce this thing, right? So I don't think the answer is there's one thing that creates the God's fire that does this thing. Like it's not, the answer is not the mud pit is the God's fire and eventually they'll come back around. But the mud pit could be touched by all of these elements of the God's fire, right? I also think that, I don't know if this is potentially dangerous or not. It probably is potentially dangerous. But I don't think that the outside world has an accurate perception of what the God's fire is, right? They've heard rumors. Nobody's really been in this ship. They've heard rumors. They've heard legends. They think there's this thing called the God's fire. Go get that and you'll be able to do these mighty magical things, right?
Sure.
But maybe it's really like uranium. You know, like uranium in and of itself doesn't do a whole lot for you. If you have a whole bunch of other technology attached to it, now you can do some awesomely powerful things, right?
That's true.
So those are some things. Those are some things to consider. Is I think there's multiple different answers, and you know, to bring it around to our next point, we don't have to have a definitive answer going in. We want to settle on the answer that the players bring into focus, not necessarily lead the players to the answer that we have decided upon well in advance, right? So that brings us to plot radar, because that's our tool for doing that. So let's get our little pug back in his little pug bed so that he can continue snoring again.
There you go.
Dom, do you have a lot of uranium in your garage? Did you suddenly?
Yep. It just made me think.
It just made me think. There you go, buddy.
The Libyans.
Where's our overhead
The
cam?
Libyans. It's right there.
Well, why is it not on?
Because I haven't turned it on.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
I mean, line things up. Then maybe people.
Yeah, this is compelling TV, is watching me stare at the ceiling. All right. So for those of you who are longtime viewers, you may be familiar with this tool that I've created. It's actually in the Iron Keep Patreon folder. It is the 1st of February. If you backed us on Patreon, thank you so much. If you haven't, guess what? It's not too late to drop us a pledge at the $5 or higher level, and you'll have access to the PDF of this blank document. You can also stare at the screen and recreate your own. Choice is yours.
I mean, it's already there.
It's already there. It's already there. You could just kick in $5 a month and get access to the rest of the goodies that I have in that folder.
It's true.
So the concept here is that we take hints, clues, villains, basically any story element that the players either have encountered or are going to encounter, and we categorize them in relation to how close they are to the party encountering them, and actually inspecting them for more detail, right? So I didn't bring any Post-it notes with me, but I don't think I have any index cards either. I might have a couple.
I wonder if they make any not outrageously expensive fantasy-themed postcards.
Oh, Post-it notes?
Yeah, Post-it notes.
Well, the only ones that I know of that are fantasy-themed are the ones that have the little quadrile grid on them, but that doesn't really count.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. These aren't going to work. All right, those are already written on. Fair enough. We're just going to write on the sheet. But the point being is that we track stuff. So this is all based on the idea that we have story elements that are vague, right? Either deliberately or because the party does not have enough information about them, or we just decided off the top of our heads to drop an interesting detail. Whatever it is.
Here.
I'll just write on these spell cards. Perfect.
Why not?
Yeah. And so your job as the DM is to always reveal more information, right? That's what you do, is you provide information to the players, they respond to it, they ask further questions, or they take further action that reveals more detail about it. Your job is to reveal that detail, to convey that information to them. So it's continually a process of knowledge management and sharing as they interact with it. But the beauty of this system is that this allows you to prioritize where your thought process needs to be and know what you have to answer for when the players ask about something. Because generally players don't ask about stuff wildly out of the blue. Sometimes you will see it happen if they've been having a long email discussion without you and somebody goes, hey, what about that book that we found? And the next thing you know, like top of the next session, they go, we opened that blue book with the velvet cover. And you're like, oh, shit, I don't even know what that was. But the key to manage, to not freaking out about your improv and not having everything like 100% pre-planned before you ever even hand it to them is knowing that you'll be able to provide an answer when they ask, but also if you use this approach, you can kind of track which things they're most likely to ask about or interact with, and devote a lot more time to those things as you're prepping and thinking about your game, and not worry about the stuff that's further off on the horizon, not really in play for this particular session, right? So we're going to give you an example of kind of filling out this sheet for based on last night's session. The columns on this sheet are divided out in proximity to what they're going to encounter next, right? So immediate means next session they're going to encounter this thing, whatever this is. Now, I can for sure put down I'm going to call them techno-vegapygmies, the Tekapygmies?
Tekapygmies.
I'm going to call them Tekapygmies.
Vegetechno. Tecmo Bowl.
The Tekapygmies, right? So these are the ones who worship technology and whatnot. They're going to encounter those people next session, unless something wildly bizarre happens and they don't get it, right? So I need to really put a lot of prep time into who are they, what do they use, what are their tactics, what's the environment look like, da-da-da-da. This is a high priority for me, right? Things that are approaching or distant. Well, something that's distant, I hate to say it, I kind of think the God's Fire is distant. So
could be.
Let's look at let's just get our mind around what these columns are. Next session, 2, maybe 3 sessions away, 3 or 4 or more sessions away from them encountering it, right? So approaching is probably like 1 or 2 sessions. Next session, the next 2 to 3 sessions, and this is, it's coming, they might not necessarily know. Now, as James V points out, and I agree, in my mind, God's Fire is definitely distant. Partly because we've established that it's down on the bottom deck, right? They've got to go through 4 different levels in order to get to this thing.
Sure.
Right? So that's for sure 3 sessions away. Unless we can shake up our assumptions here. Maybe the Techapygmies, maybe they have some sort of like direct route, fast track elevator. You know, we could put a wormhole in there that sends them directly to the God's Fire, which isn't a bad idea. Because it's the thing that's foremost on their mind, having it be in this distant column kind of gets frustrating, right? So we could have a thing where we backdoor them through, you know, a little, or put them through a little trap door directly into the basement, and then they learn that their mission is not just to necessarily get the God's Fire, but their mission is to fix the God's Fire so that they can use it to use X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Right. So it's possible that it might not live in here. All right, but these are our 3 most active columns, right? Once they have encountered something and have dealt with it, we put it in the closed or retired column. So, you know, last session I would have put Cave of the Iron Worm. Now that's closed, I can put Cave of the Iron Worm in my closed and retired column. This stuff is stuff that they have basically thoroughly explored or have no more interest in exploring. They're done with it. It's finished, and I don't have any plans for it. That's great. That's fine. You know, those 3 statues. So that brings us to our last column over here, right? So dangling is stuff that they are aware of that they have a question about that you're not planning to introduce in the next 4 or 5 sessions, right? These 2 columns are all about player awareness. So dangling is something that they know about that you're not planning to introduce right away. We could theoretically put the God's Fire in the dangling column. You know, sometimes it's something that it's a hint that you dropped that they've latched onto, but they're not sure what to do with it, and they don't plan on taking any action to it, but they want to know more about it, right? So in this particular case, I've often had the Iron Keep as something that's dangling.
Okay.
The players have a very high awareness of it. The campaign is called the Iron Keep Chronicles, but we're not in a position to go explore it, do anything with it, interact with it, right? Dormant is stuff. So just for clarification, I'm going to put high player awareness, comma, low DM priority. All right? Conversely, hey, you gotta lay down, buddy. I know, are you bored? You gotta lay down. Oh, ear flaps. Conversely, the dormant column has low or no player awareness. But significant DM priority. Right? I would say, I don't know. I'm trying to think of it. Oftentimes these are things where you drop to them a hint that they somehow they just don't. They don't. They forget about. They don't follow up on. The classic example of this was in the Sunless Citadel. At one point, Havana was like, "Okay, I searched the body," and I'm like, "Okay, you find X number of coins, Y number of gems, shiny hand mirror, and a scroll case." And she's like, "Okay, great."
Yeah.
And never opened the scroll case, which had a map inside of it, right? So it's that sort of stuff. Honestly, this is stuff that players forget about. Now, the good news is that you can always take steps as the DM to pop this stuff up into their awareness and highlight again. And you just have to be careful with that because sometimes it feels a little like, boing, I'm hitting you with the clue bat, right? So you have to be You have to be careful with that. So Avril's parents are definitely dangling, right? Well, are they definitely dangling? Anything in this dangling category could also, it's tough to go in whether it goes into distant or not. The thing is, we're at the very start of the campaign here, right? But let's put, now, here's the thing. Avril's parents, as foretold in that prophecy vision, is being held hostage, or they're being held captive by some technopygmies. I want to say technopiggies, which
technopiggies.
Technopiggies. Oink oink. We're playing Gamma World. So that's been foretold. Well, I think there was a strong implication coming out of the session last night that they're going to go rescue Avril's parents. I don't know whether that's true or not.
I mean, they're definitely going to try and find them, but.
But then I think Avril's parents actually, if the Techopygmies are the ones who are holding them captive, holding her parents captive, if they're going to encounter them next session, then Avril's parents either need to be in this session, or they need to be approaching, right? So I think they do live in this column over here somewhere. I think it would be smart to pay it off sooner rather than later, because it's really high on our mind. I mean, the thing is, they could have escaped, right? We could have a situation where they escaped. I feel like that's a little bit stringing them along. We could also have them be killed, eaten, or one of them could have been killed. I don't know. But I think, in terms of like how I'm going to want to focus my prep and what I want to put thought into, I better put Avril's parents in this immediate column, and then I can always move them back into approaching if I want to. Like, ideally with this setup, what you should be doing is putting these on Post-it notes, and then you can move them back around, back and forth as the actual play changes situation, changes the layout of the map here, right? But I'm going to put her parents in this immediate column, right? Are they closed or retired? I don't know that they're closed or retired, but I am going to put the, I'm going to call them, for lack of a better term, the melding Vegapygmies into the dormant column, okay? Now, I could put them into the closed and retired column. We may never come back to them. It is a little bit of a misnomer to put them into the dormant column, because the players they do have awareness of them, they just have no priority or focus on them. I guess, to be true to my methodology here, I'm going to put them in the retired.
This is where Post-it notes are handy.
Yeah, right, exactly. And I thought about bringing some, but I just couldn't put my hands on them immediately. So that's fine. So those people live in the closed and retired. What are things that are approaching? Okay, there's a couple different things that are approaching. We need to deal with the AIs on the ship. We know that they're going to probably encounter those sometime soon or later, right? We need to deal with the robots on the ship. We didn't encounter any last night, but we're going to. We're going to encounter them. So those, I think, are approaching in the next 2 or 3 sessions, maybe even the next session. Like, are they going to encounter a robot on their way to deal with the Techopygmies? I honestly think that next session ends up being a fairly big and arduous either combat or skirmish session. I think there's probably going to be a lot of fighting, because these Techopygmies have been painted as violent cannibals or violent, kind of carnivores, and I just don't think the party's going to be able to navigate that without getting into a series of fights, right? So that makes me think I don't want to have a bunch of other encounters and information get dropped, because we're going to eat a lot of time doing this slow motion fight back and forth of, veggie pygmies with ray guns show up and start burning holes in player characters. What are you doing, buddy?
It's water.
He's like, I want one too. Why doesn't Luigi get one? Luigi likes water. He drinks water.
Luigi.
Did you think about getting Luigi water?
I did.
They can't see Luigi because of the overhead cam.
Oh, they can see Luigi. That's enough. There he is.
There he is. Luigi turned 9 yesterday, everyone.
Happy birthday to the Weege.
Weege. So those things are approaching. I think we have to do something about the AIs. We have to do something about the robots. I would have to look closer at the adventure. There is like the library. Something that they have, which is not closed. I don't know what to do about this, like the key quest aspect to it, right? Like where does that fit in on this? That's like a through line throughout the thing is the key quest.
I mean, I would say it's technically immediate because it's going to be happening in the next episode and will be continuing to happen every episode, right?
Right.
So in terms of the methodology, it would go in immediate.
Yeah, it's kind of like an ongoing thing. I maybe
could
should
put
have
it in
put it
everyone,
in its own thing, but yeah, it's something that we need to address every single session. So we might as well put it in the next one.
Yeah.
And maybe it just never moves off to close and retire until they have a full complement of keys.
Sure.
Right.
If they want.
Yeah.
Of course.
Do they need keys when they have Grayson's sword? Hey.
Yeah.
Lay down. You can do it.
Or potentially Vegapygmies
Hey.
or something that can help them open things.
Right. Once they redeem those Technopiggies, they'll be set.
Technopiggies?
Techapygmies. Vegapygmies and Techapygmies. Where does this put the God's Fire on this whole thing, right? So there's the actual location of the God's Fire, which is a long ways away, right? I think that's in like engineering, deck 5, deck 6, or whatever. But information about the God's Fire needs to be fairly close. I'm gonna put the God's Fire I am gonna qualify it as knowledge.
Ooh. Thanks, Bastion.
Thank
you for the birthday bits for the
birthday
boy.
bits. Yay! Knowledge of the God's Fire.
Thomas W.D. Young.
Hey, what's up? So I think that's approaching. I don't know if we'll get to it in the next session, but we need to address knowledge of the God's Fire in the next 2 to 3 sessions for sure, right? So that they have an idea of like, oh, okay, here's what it actually is or whatever. Now, some of this could be tied to the Techapygmies might have knowledge of the God's Fire that's more clarifying than what the melding Vegapygmies did. Or they might find something in the library that gives them an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other advantage to this is I can start prioritizing if I want to have props and in-game handouts and things like that, is I can start going, oh, well, they might go to the library. They might find themselves wandering into the library sometime soon. I need to make like the weird map handouts and things like that, because there's like a section, if you look in the adventure, there's a section where they can fire up basically a viewing screen, but it sort of malfunctions and it shows them a deck for like a minute, and they can ask questions and look at it, but then it goes away. I actually have some assets that I think will help me do that. So an ideal thing that I think falls into this dormant and dangling category, I think the owl falls into, it's either dangling, it's not dangling, I think it's dormant. They picked it up, they looked at it, they went, that's neat, put it in their backpack. If I don't bring it up again, there's like a 50-50 chance that it's gonna come up again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna put the owl here in this dormant category because it was examined, they screwed with it a little bit, and they went, I'm going to save this for later. They deliberately, like she deliberately said, I'm going to save this for later. I'm going to put it in my backpack. So they have an owl. Now, again, the beauty of this column is I can promote anything in either of these columns directly into immediate approaching, into one of the other columns just by saying, oh yeah, you find another one of those cylinders. Pff, boom. All right, now we're dealing with this issue again, right? Disco pygmies. Very good. So things that are distant in here, in my opinion, Basharla's sacred vessel, like crafting a body for the goddess or the goddess. That is distant in my mind. The other thing that I think is distant is actually getting to, main engineering. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the other advantages to this approach is I can decide what sort of story structure I want to craft based on where I start putting things in terms of like planning my sessions out, right? If I want this to be a build to a climax and boom, fireworks go off and that's the end of the adventure, then I want to keep this pushed off as long as possible, right? But if I want more of a sandboxy type feel where we go around to the different parts of the ship and collect the various, magic MacGuffins that then allow us to build to our climax and do the thing, then I might want to think about pushing main engineering up further into the arc of the session so that they have time to like go down there, investigate it, find out, oh, we don't know, we know some stuff now, but it turns out we need part B of our key quest, let's go look for part B, and they go to another part of the ship, etc., right? As envisioned, this adventure is you start at the top and you literally just drain your way to the bottom, fighting a sloth of, leaving a swath of destruction in your wake. But I think it's maybe more interesting if they do get on a turbo lift and go directly down to main engineering, find out that, the reactor's going into overload or whatever, so they better do X, Y, and Z to create this thing or whatever it is, and get out before it blows up, right? So then they have more of a reason to explore around the ship. I'm generally not a huge fan of sandbox-style adventures, but I think given how we've painted the ship as this enormous thing and the different areas of the ship, like it's not like the ship actually becomes less interesting as you go down, right? We talked about this earlier, where the bottom level of the ship is just like theater, gymnasium, auditorium, cargo hold, cargo, the ship gets less interesting because it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Why not keep that interest a little more balanced and well-rounded, right? I think that's one of the advantages to using this is I can go, oh, do I want to hold this in distant? The other beauty of this approach is these two things aren't necessarily that much different, right? Like I can move stuff from distant to immediate and the players don't ever know. It's just a matter of changing their awareness of it or introducing them to it, right? But it allows me to kind of see this allows me to see across my various prompts and storylines and go, okay, well, these two things are connected, so they live here. This key quest is independent, that's its own thing. Knowledge of the God's Fire is related to this thing in main engineering. That's also related to Basharla's sacred vessel. This could all be somehow communicated through the library. Somewhere in here we could have a turbo shaft that might just connect all this stuff, right? Yeah. So it gives me an overview, it gives me a view into my plot that allows me to see connections that might not necessarily be there, or to make connections so that I can take stuff that's way out and push it forward, or let stuff just sort of drop off into the dangling dormant category. So, that's the, yeah. Well, so I don't have that as that is distant. I'm going to put that as distant. Is
Pinocchio,
Grayson's Pinocchio moment. Well, we'll just call it Grayson's humanity, right? Because that is one of the themes that we need to have on the board. Like it's not necessarily it's a story element. It's not a specific clue or anything like that. But it is a story element that we want to bubble up at some point, that we want to grapple with. Much the same thing as Avril's parents is. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else that came up last night that needs to be... I think somewhere in here as a dangling thing that the players are aware of that I don't necessarily have a good place for this to slot in is the cataclysm. Like they know that there was a cataclysm event, right? But they're mistaken about what it is. Like they think it's the God's fire and it's not. So that needs to be. I'm not planning to have the cataclysm get revisited upon the players soon, but maybe it should be a distant element instead.
Sure.
Because in my mind, the cataclysm event is different than the God's fire. We've already talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. Anti-grav elevator. Yeah.
You know, folks have been talking about the Vegapygmies and how they might be the reincarnated versions of people. We were talking about this earlier. I was thinking that plants have a very almost computer-like method of operation, right? They have their programming of what they need to do, and it's very simple, but it contains very complex organisms and stuff like that. So my idea was that the security system starts using organic material to recreate the lost robots or lost soldiers or whatever that they had, and instead of rebuilding them with parts that break down and stuff, it decides to
start rebuilding them with organic plant life
that can then have its own artificial intelligence, as it were.
Right.
But since thousands of years have gone by, they have evolved into an actual race of beings. I mean, Vegapygmies, as set forth in Volo's guide, are
they're pretty mundane.
But they're born out of a body that was killed by a russet.
Russet mold. Yep.
Russet mold.
And that's in the adventure, actually. There's a room that's just filled with russet mold, and when you open the door, it just buries you. And it's supposed to, smother a character, and essentially, like, if that character dies, then, like, 3 rounds later, a Vegapygmy walks out and doesn't remember any of its life. And I was just like, meh. So that is somewhat, that is canonical or inspired by this.
Sure.
I think that's an interesting idea. I mean, I think we could put that as a...
It would be interesting if the Tekapygmies were more hardlined into what they originally were purposed for, right? As security. So that's why they're more violent and more, prone to patrolling and all that stuff. Whereas the Vegapygmies are like, I think we can get out of that, mindset and stuff. We are better than this,
I think, there's some other themes that are going on here that don't necessarily like play into plot radar, but I think there's certainly a theme of like different castes between the decks. I think people want to get up to this top deck that they've wandered into. This is heaven. That's why it's called heaven. So, I don't know where that fits into. I don't know where that fits into all of this, but it just made me think that one of the things that I need to kind of reinforce, or at least that occurs to me, is talking about this. I've tried to set up a mirror dichotomy of there's the Vegapygmies who have rejected what the ship used to be and had to offer, and then the Tekapygmies are trying to recover it. right? And to me, it's more interesting if they're self-motivated rather than like AI directed. But you do make a good point that like that would be a great way to introduce these AIs. Like what if the security AI has a console or a monitor or a terminal in their area, and they commune with it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, doppelgangers. That is dangling. Doppelgangers are definitely dangling.
Tried to bring it up.
High player awareness and low DM priority. And not necessarily because I don't want to deal with them. It's just they're an element on the board that when they encounter them, they might encounter them soon because geographically, those doppelganger encounters are close to where the tech epigmies are, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. Also keep in mind that we have...
Doppeldangler.
We have foreshadowed the doppelganger arrival with the vision that Grayson had in the Palace of Mirrors, right? So there was this scene described in the Palace of Mirrors where the party is literally like, basically like getting their asses handed to them. And then these guys in suits show up and lift their visor and go, "Brother, you've returned," and they're addressing Grayson, right? So that scene, like if we can get to that scene, that needs to kind of be out there. Like that, we gotta look for opportunities to bring that back in, right? The other thing that I put on the board is I described that atmosphere issue, like when the door first opened, it's like, oh, it's heavy on your heart. In my mind, the ship is so overgrown with plant life that it's either hypoxia or something's going on with the mix in the atmosphere, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's plant life that has grown without any sunlight.
Right.
Right. So,
and that was one of the things that I wish I'd put in the mud pit room is like this area is like studded with grow lights or something like that.
Yeah.
You know that if I put just a little bit extra polish into that particular room,
some sort of hydroponic system.
Yeah, I think it would have given them like a more of a integrated feel to the whole ship.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's hinted at that there was an atmosphere issue. They kind of like noted, but I almost wonder if it's actually a reverse problem that they're not very oxygenated. Like maybe there's my idea was there's something wrong with the ship where it can't generate the oxygen that it requires for normal human life, right? So what it did was it decided, since I've got this overabundance of carbon dioxide, or for whatever reason I can produce a bunch of carbon dioxide, let's switch everything from mammalian life over to plant life, and that I can maintain. Like I can actually climate control for that. I can't maintain enough oxygen on the ship to keep a full ship of colonists alive. So let's reverse engineer them over to plant people, and I can keep plant people alive because for whatever reason I can very easily generate a bunch of carbon dioxide, but I can't generate enough oxygen, or the scrubbers can't keep up enough, or whatever.
Yeah, although that seems like it could be, a more difficult solution. Whereas another idea would be, I can't
kill all the colonists.
Yes.
The 2001: A Space Odyssey solution.
Exactly. But have the plant life, because the plant life creates the oxygen, right? So if they create an overabundance of plant life that will then create the oxygen, then the system doesn't have to try to manufacture the oxygen itself, right? But plants just sort of start taking over.
Yeah.
Especially if
they edge out the mammalian life.
Yeah. Especially if the system is starting to use that organic material to create organic robots, basically.
Right. Well, and the other idea along those lines is maybe the oxygen is being used for something else, or it's needed for something else.
Yeah.
There's some other system that's maybe they need oxygen in order to. Maybe they actually do have some clones like alive, some clone bodies or whatever, and they need that oxygen in order to keep those, specimens viable or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting conundrum, right? Like, what is that? What does that mean?
Right. shit. Sorry, just remembered. It's rent day, and I forgot the check.
Hey everyone, it's rent day.
I'm gonna bring that back tonight.
I know, we're almost done here, buddy. You still gotta lay down though. I don't like it. Do it. Are there still taters? Are there still taters? The answer is, I got the large taters.
BSB Carrot says, mammalian life forms become perceived as mutants, and they're the ones that were kicked out of the ship, all of the Swedish gnomes who speak German. Bastian's idea, the aliens created healthy organic bodies to transfer their consciousnesses into, but all they could create with their resources are vegapygmies. In the transfer process, their full consciousnesses, memories weren't retained. They go on in their current state for generations. Then the technopygmies are ones who have started to regain or find out more about the original aliens' consciousnesses and split from the ones who haven't or don't want to. So here's one final aspect of this whole plot radar system that there's an element that I've included that we haven't touched on, but it brings up an ideal opportunity to do it, which is all of these things can be put into this Sparks area, right? And Sparks goes along the continuum. It does not fit into any specific like time frame of when the players might encounter it or whatever, but I can put, is there a system that has colonist, for lack of a better term, colonist personality or expertise imprints, right? So we talked about the whole idea that their consciousness is somehow stored. It's not in the actual adventure itself, right? But a couple times now we've had a spark of, okay, what if this, what if the colonists, what if you could transfer their consciousness into the computer somewhere, retrieve it somewhere, blah, 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 it's damaged somehow, all of that kind of stuff. To me, that's a spark. That's an idea that we have, that it's like I flashed on some piece of information, inspiration. I'm not sure what to do with it. I'm going to write it down. Yep.
Likewise, like your whole idea of the security AI is making organic bots. / vegapygmies. Like, I think that's a spark. We don't, do we have to decide that it goes in here? No, but it is definitely an idea worth considering, and it may not show up in this column, but it might show up later. We also have issues of like, distant issues of what's going on with the zoo, / Earth. We also, in this distant column, have what's going on the tween decks. We also have an issue of there is definitely like a mind flayer loose somewhere around here. Why? What's that all about? Etc. Right? Shimmickson says, what if it's not a colony ship? What if it's a bomber or a military ship? Yeah. I think that's actually an interesting question that we need to ask ourselves is, what if it's not a colony ship?
Bastion sees it as a cruise ship. I don't know why you'd say that. It's not like there's an entire level that's all cruise ship stuff.
So that's an interesting, like that spark can just be a question, right? All right. So we've gone a little bit over time, which is fine. I think this should give you a good feel for like what Plot Radar can be. You know, how you can use it. Again, if you're a Patreon backer, you can get a blank template of this and use it in your own home game. I really suggest that you do, because if you watched Storm King's Thunder or you watched Sunless Citadel, you were able to see me track these elements and then reshuffle them on the fly as I was doing my game prep to bring things into focus and like cut away chaff that's like, oh, we're never gonna follow up on this. This was a great idea that we had, but it's not important. Players don't care. We need to kind of, you know, push things to a climax. Let's, you know, cut the dead weight and focus on the things that the players are excited about. And so I think we can take this model and, you know, come back Tuesday. It acts as a roadmap for us to prep on Tuesday. It acts as a roadmap for me to read the adventure in terms of like, well, okay, what do I want to focus on next? What do I really need to do my homework on? And then we will come back next week and we'll shift things back around and go, okay, well, we learned some stuff. Invariably during a session, I improvise some details that I'm not prepared to like I hadn't thought a lot about, right?
Yeah.
You know, even last night, you know, a lot of that Veggie Pygmy stuff were ideas that I had been thinking over, but until you actually say them out loud, they take on a different meaning or they have a different angle. For instance, the whole cataclysm thing, right?
Sure.
Like that's being completely misinterpreted right now. Well, the Tekka Pygmies have the opportunity to maybe clarify that or whatever, right? Yeah, I won't forget my iPad next week. It went well without my iPad, but my iPad is incredibly handy in terms of having stats at my fingertips and whatnot. I had a lot of stuff going on last night when it was one of those things that like leave the house for the next 8 hours. Just, So it worked out. I was not unhappy with it. But yeah, it's funny how you realize, oh, I really kind of lean on this thing pretty heavily. Hey, you can do it. You can lay down. Go on. I don't like it. You know what I do like? French fries. So I apologize. We didn't have a lot of time to do Q&A today. I thought maybe we would have a little bit more, but that was overambitious on my part. That's okay. I think that this exercise is very valuable, right? It's valuable for me as the DM to get ideas flowing and see where connections are and help pin down what the themes and issues are. I think it's also helpful for you folks at home to watch along with this and go, oh, okay, now I understand how he's using it and how he's dumping stuff into buckets. And you can do a little search on the internet for a thing called Kanban. There's, you know, this is essentially a type, a very specific style of Kanban board that's been adapted to RPGs, right? But, you know, a Kanban board is generally like, I'm trying to deliver a product in X number of weeks, and these are the tasks that I have to knock off in order to do that. This has a little more open-ended flow to it and is about clues and ideas kind of aggregating into your immediate bucket. So.
Kanban.
So, yeah, Kanban, yeah, a Kanban board. So it's a part of agile development. It's not something that I honestly came up with this idea completely independently. So there may be some sort of applicability that I don't, you know, that I don't understand or know about. But once I introduced this thing, a whole bunch of people were like, "Oh, it's just like Kanban." I'm like, "It's not just like Kanban." But it certainly shares a lot in common with the structure of it for sure, right? The final piece that we didn't really talk about is you could put a roster of your players on here, color code them, and then like tag them to each of the different things involved in your plot radar. So I would definitely put like Avril's parents is tagged to Avril, and the Grayson's humanity is tagged to him, and Basharla's sacred vessel is tagged to Ava. And we don't really have a thing for Thawne on here, right? So that makes me question, like, where's Thawne in all of this? What's his... I don't have a good answer for that right now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
What was I going to say about this? Oh, questions. If you have questions, I was thinking of starting a GM tips channel on our Discord for folks that want to continue the conversation over there, because we don't really have a disorganized play section channel, I don't think necessarily on there. But if we do, we're not using it very much. No, no, we don't have one. So I'll make a GM prep one. I just started an LFG channel, looking for group channel, for folks that want to maybe get together with other people watching these streams, folks from all over the world who want to put together a game and play a game on Roll20, or even if you guys are close to each other, maybe DisOrganized play. Yeah, that's very, very good. Clever, very clever. Anyway, if you guys are wanting to get into a game, and you're looking for folks, well, that person who's typing right next to you in the ether might be that player. So anyway, go ahead, check out the Discord, and you might find something that you like, and I will start that GM prep or GM tips channel as well. So if you guys have questions for Tom, we can sort of consolidate them there, or you can obviously ask Tom on Twitter @DungeonBastard, or you can send them to @SavingThrowShow, and we can pass them on that way.
Sounds great. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. It was a great discussion today, and I always enjoy these little recap shows to give us a chance to reflect back on the session and what were some successes, what were some missed opportunities, what we need to focus on and shape in going forward. So that's great. I appreciate my time with you. My time with you is almost over. But thank you to everyone for joining us. Thanks to everyone who's a Patreon backer or has otherwise donated to last night's game or donated throughout the month. It's a brand new month now. It's a brand new start
another push towards rent.
We begin climbing up that, pushing that boulder up the hill once again.
We just made it last time, so that was very, very good.
So thank you so much for your support, whether it is financial or personal or on the social media or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We definitely, that's the only way that we get to put this together for you. So thank you for your contribution and your passion. Tonight is Star Wars Never Tell Me the Odds with America's GM, David Crennan.
Yes.
Who's going to get blown up with a thermal detonator tonight?
A lot of people probably.
A lot of people probably.
Yeah.
Tomorrow night, it is the Coolumphant return.
Yeah, because you didn't use triumphant.
Not triumphant. It is Coolumphant.
Yeah. Cool
Ultimate return of episode 3 of Wildcards. So you have time between now and tomorrow to get caught up on your previous 2 installments. You left on kind of a cliffhanger, is that right?
Yeah, a little bit of a cliffhanger.
All right.
My character has a daughter, apparently. It's Tom.
I'm the daughter.
Yeah. It's Luigi.
Luigi's the daughter.
That old Irish lass, Luigi.
Oh, Luigi. Oh. Exciting. So find out how that plays out tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Pacific time. On Sunday at 5, it is Tempting Fate. So you can tune in and see Sunday's GM, Rick Budd.
Yeah,
he's like
that's accurate.
He's not America's GM. He's Sunday's GM.
That's not accurate.
He gets his own day. I take the day off, everybody. Otherwise, I would probably try and arm wrestle him for it. But yeah, Tempting Fate. Is there anything? Do you know what system, what skin they're playing this week?
Neon and Chrome. It's a cyberpunk system of lasers and feelings. And
I kind of want to sit in on that.
Ellie Glavich, Jody Hauser, Rick Bear, and Sam and Gina.
Oh, wow. Great lineup. There's no room for me at that table. Let's do that.
5 folks, yeah.
That's too bad. I love cyberpunk, but there you go. Awesome. So that's an exciting time you can look forward to. And then when we come back around on Monday and do it all over again. So thanks everyone who's been here for us throughout the week. Thanks to our mods, BSB Care and Flockwad, and all of our regulars who help keep the channel safe, friendly, clean, and accessible. I'm going to go take my dog out because he's become a little bit of a snoodle here. He's a grumpy old man at 63 years old, so I guess he's probably earned that right. Until next time, let's dungeon!
Click.
There
we go.
All right. Well,
see?
Can you try clicking in more of like a John Philip Sousa style next time? That's it.